What's up, everybody? Noodles here. It is Sunday night. It is that night where I decided to devote myself to you guys for a special evening where I can spend some affectionate time with you all to make sure that everybody is feeling like they have someone to connect with just as well as somebody that they can relate to. Most of you know what's going on today, and some of you will be new to it, but this is my one time of the week that I devote to talking about some more serious topics so that this way we can have more people in our community join hands together so that we can feel that we are not alone out there fighting the battles that we fight. So tonight it was kind of difficult for me to come up with a topic that was outside of the scope of what we've been discussing for the last few weekends. We have gone over the topics of anxiety, depression, and ADHD in the past few weekends. So one of the things that made it difficult for me today in particular was the fact that I had a rough evening, or a rough weekend, my apologies, in that I am living with new roommates and I'm not getting much rest because of our conflict of schedules on the weekend. As a streamer, you know, I'm up all night and gaming till morning. But then in the morning, everybody gets up and starts to get active. So that's been difficult for me in regards to preparing myself mentally and just as well spiritually to be ready for you guys this evening. So I almost was not capable of doing what I needed to do tonight, but I'm never going to try and ever fail you guys. So I am here. I decided that I will talk about something and just freestyle something from the top of my mind and from the bottom of my heart. And that is the topic of affection and how it affects depression. This is going to be a somewhat more opinionated based and experienced based discussion as opposed to my previous discussions about the topics of depression, anxiety, and ADHD that were more kind of based on, you know, factual and scientific issues that we deal with, chemistry and the body, physiology, and so forth, and then breaking it down into techniques and methods that we can deal with those issues. Today is more like a just chatting session where I will be hanging out with you guys and just talking about affection and how I feel that it's been affecting my life in regards to whether I desire it and whether I need it, and how it may impact me positively as well as negatively as I philosophically sat down and thought things through in regards to how it can help me with depression. This is a very, I would say, this is a familiar topic for most people who are dealing with depression issues because it becomes difficult as we become depressed and we start to isolate ourselves and separate ourselves from other people. And just as well, when we're dealing with toxic relationships, whether it's in family, friends, or so forth, it will make us feel that we are the black sheep and that we need to stand out and away from the crowd so that we can deal with our own issues. There are many excuses and many reasons as to why we seclude or separate ourselves from other people when we're dealing with depression. It can be a very complicated topic. Everybody knows what their reason is. That's not what today is about. It's more about how do we deal with the depression in regards to feeling that we are lonely and we feel that, you know, affection being that we can get love from other people. And I'm not talking about romance. I'm talking about in general. Meaning whether it's, you know, a hug, a kiss, a cuddle, a spending time together, a watching movie together. It doesn't matter what it is, just being near each other, being in the same room, being with people, not being with people, and so forth. That's what I mean when I'm talking about this subject of affection and how it's affecting us with depression. I've thought this through pretty in depth over the last few weeks or so, as I have been transitioning with my own life between being isolated in my own home and having no one around to now being in a home where I am with some family members and I have people around. Although you go from this whole experience of, oh, I need to be away from people because I am embarrassed, I'm shy, I don't feel good enough, I don't feel worthy, I feel too sad, I feel too mad. There's many negative emotions that affect us that cause us to not want to be around other individuals. Going from that to being submersed into an atmosphere or an environment in a new home now where I am constantly surrounded by people is a day-night experience when dealing with depression, and how has that necessarily been affecting me on a psychological level or even a spiritual level, meaning that how is my heart feeling in regards to the feelings that I am feeling inside, and how is my mind handling the fact that I no longer have the quiet and isolation that I used to be accustomed to as I dealt with my depression. So some of the things that have made it difficult, the challenges that I've gone through on both perspectives, on both situations, have been, for example, when I was isolated and alone, it actually made my depression a lot worse because I felt like there was no one there. There was no one that was going to be available for me when I needed someone to either talk to or I needed someone to be around for this sheer sake of sanity. You know, it can be somewhat dark being by yourself if you are a person who has their own home or apartment or so forth. Home is home. Doesn't matter to me what type of home you lived in or are currently living in. But it can feel both soothing as well as scary, and it's kind of oxymoron the way that we deal with it in regards to it's like it's its own enemy, the situation, whereas we want to kind of be alone and isolated and away from people because we don't want people to see us in that condition. We don't want to deal with people because they ask questions that we don't feel healthy enough to answer, or we're too confused or frustrated to answer. Or a lot of times when people try to help and soothe us with our conditions with depression, they often want to talk about things that they don't necessarily know how to communicate or discuss. And so that makes it rather difficult to be able to interact with people because they bring up stories or information of the past that actually make the depression worse. And so that creates a very complicated scenario where you do need to be around people. It is the healthier thing to do, to bring people into your life so that you could feel supported and feel that you are not alone, and try to get out of that clouded judgment or that dark space where you feel like there's no one out there that can understand you. It's much better to be around people that are willing to take the sacrifice or willing to invest the energy or the spiritual and mental support that you need to be able to help you, because that way they can make you feel less alienated and less alone. But at the same time, what I just brought up is a sore subject of like, how do you deal with these situations where you have people that are going to talk about sensitive subjects that they don't necessarily know how to talk about? How are you doing, Scythe Master? Thank you so much for joining me. So, you know, it makes it very hard because you're in a 50-50 situation where you have your body kind of in your mind pulling you towards, all right, I need to be around people. I need that affection. I need that love. I need that attention. But at the same time, your mind is broken and your heart is depressed. You're sad and you're stuck in these negative emotions that are making you feel like you are not good enough or that you don't want to be around other people. Thank you so much for the cheers. I appreciate it, Meister. So, you know, I have thought about this profoundly. I've thought about this with a lot of detail and time on my own. I didn't look into any of these details and information in regards to, you know, how it is affecting us psychologically in a chemistry perspective, or as well in our body physiologically like I normally do, to try and give you guys a guideline of how it affects us physically. But I can say as much as I can, you know, have an experience in regards to thinking about things. And most of us kind of hang out in this topic every Sunday for that exact reason, which is for me to use my skill sets of being able to break down information and provide you a way of describing or telling you a story about the information that makes it easier to understand. So here's the thing about dealing with the affection. Yes, the affection can make us feel better, but there's a very sensitive, thin line, very dangerous zone between when it's healthy and when it's not healthy. And that's the biggest thing that I wanted to really focus on, that I thought about in detail over the last few weeks or so. Yes, the affection is great because getting love is the most powerful source of energy, or the most powerful source of experience that we can have in life. But the problem with love itself is that most people don't really necessarily understand what love is in regards to breaking it down as a piece of information they can understand within their mind, understanding how it really affects us physically, what it doesn't affect physically, what is real and what is not real. A lot of people get lost in the translation or the information from media that is constantly bombarding us with the idea of romance and love. But romance is not love. Romance is just an expression that stems from the idea of love or the experience or feeling of love. Love is not just a feeling. Love is a complicated experience where there is a lot of things happening with your body physically, but just as well, most importantly, it's a lot of information to process because of the things that I spoke about in the past. I spoke about in my previous streams, my previous live streams on anxiety and depression and ADHD, about the subject that I will bring up again in regards to there being two minds in our body, neurologically, actually scientifically, that the brain is a brain and that our heart is a second brain, it also thinks. So when you try to take these things into consideration, it makes it very complicated about the idea of trying to understand something like love, because it doesn't become just a feeling that we have no way of kind of saying we understand what it is. Because before love, before we had to deal with feelings, before we understood that the heart was a second mind, we dealt with feelings as a way of thinking about it as some kind of magical in the air stuff that we don't understand. Like, we don't really understand gravity or oxygen as normal people who are not scientists. So we kind of think of it as magical, and that's where the whole romance aspect comes into it through media, through just, from marketing to videos to entertainment, constantly teaching us that, you have to do all these romantic gestures in order to express or understand or even experience love. But that's not love. Love is just it's actually a infinite experience of being able to feel very enlightened. Enlightenment is the experience of feeling pure, authentic, real happiness without there being a condition or a reason for you to feel happy. So you have gotten to a point with your health or well-being mentally, with your mental health well-being, that you are capable of being so positive and so happy and so enriched and so positive and so excited, and so many positive feelings are flowing through every vein in your body, that you feel that everything is serene. You feel like you're in this magical experience, that everything is sunshine. That's pretty much kind of the best way for me to describe enlightenment, because it actually is a very complicated thing to express to people. I have gotten training on enlightenment through Buddhism as a practice, as a lifestyle. And so it becomes a very complicated subject. But in general, that's basically what love is. Love is the experience of you being able to be so free of thought that clouds you, or judgment, stuff, noise in your head that distracts you from what you're focused on, that your focus is so laser sharp on whatever is in front of you that that object becomes so important to you, that it becomes so valuable, so precious, that it makes you absolutely excited through every inch of your body. That is the experience of enlightenment. It's being able to truly appreciate unconditional love, to truly feel that there is no reason for you to be excited about whatever it is that's in front of you. You are just excited because you are just a person who is purely positively enriched with happiness and excitement for the good things in life, and you are able to focus on the good things in life and forget about the bad things. That right there is truly what love is. So love is not romance. Romance is just something that was created through human interaction. It's a way for us to communicate and express a way that we feel, but it's not the actual feeling. The feelings themselves are very complicated, chemical reactions that are happening within our body, just as well as I discussed in the past with dealing with knowing that there is a brain mind and a heart mind. Your heart mind is processing thoughts just like your brain mind is processing thoughts, and those feelings that you're feeling are pretty much thoughts of things that are happening around you. Just like you think, oh, I should drink this, you think, oh, I should feel this. And so that being said, dealing with affection, so going from breaking down love as an experience, as what it really truly is, and what it's like to truly feel it, now we can kind of bring that love back into me talking about the topic of affection and how it affects depression. So when you're dealing with that enlightenment, that's super excited. Thank you so much for the follow. Thank you so much for being here, Sister Ellie. I appreciate you. But when you're dealing with the experience of the pure enlightenment, of the joy, the experience of happiness and positivity, and you're just really just happy, positively happy. There's no reason, there's no condition that's making you happy. That love, when you have that love, okay, that is something that you would, there's nothing more intoxicating, more addicting than that feeling and that experience. That is what we're looking for in the affection that we constantly are yearning for in our heart. When we feel that feeling inside our chest of, I am so sad, I don't feel worthy, I don't feel happy, I don't feel like I'm good enough, and you have all these bad thoughts happening up here in the mental conditioning of your brain, the programming of your mind because of depression, your heart is saying to you in its own mind, in its own thoughts, in its own language, hey, why don't we try to distract your mind from all of this negativity by trying to fill the void, fill the emptiness with affection, with love. And that's the kind of love that we're talking about here. We're talking about enlightened love. We're not talking about romance love. That's where it becomes complicated, where we get confused with the idea or the feeling of wanting affection when we're dealing with depression. Because when we're depressed, we want an affection, but we don't really understand how to translate that affection we're looking for. So me being able to break that down kind of into somewhat of a science in my own language and get you to understand and visualize what I'm talking about and get you on the same page with me, we can kind of talk about the same conversation and have the same topics to go on. And that's about really understanding how to break that information down so we know how to deal with it, which if any of you are here returning from my previous nights on therapy gaming, you know that that's my specialty, with breaking information down so we can really understand, get down to the nitty-gritty, and break it down so that we can create solutions from problems, because that's ultimately what problem solving truly is. And that's the thing, is that we have a problem we're dealing with our conditions, with our mental conditions, with our physical conditions. And what we need to do is realize that we have a problem and try to create a solution. Because if you have fire, you don't say fire and then make more fire. That's not solution. A solution to fire is putting it out, is the opposite. So we always need to find the opposite of what we're dealing with. Dealing with depression, we're dealing with the sadness, with the mental conditions. And so we need to find the happiness, and we need to deal with the mental conditioning, which is the reprogramming. Now, with the affection in regards to feeling that, the reason why I'm bringing this topic up is because it's something that I've dealt with myself as I've been going through these experiences, dealing with my own depression recently, and I've had my own encounters with my family members who have tried to interact with me and provide me affection within their own description, within their own understanding, within their own lack of judgment and lack of understanding of what it truly is, what affection really is. People determine and deal with affection in different ways because there's no standardization, there's no language that is explaining these feelings to us in the way that I'm explaining it today. For people in general to have a general idea or understanding of what they're dealing with, for them to know how to communicate and know how to deal with the conditions that we're dealing with each other. Because ultimately, that's what all of this stuff breaks down to. No matter what condition you're dealing with, ultimately we have to deal with human beings, because that's the experience that we deal with in our life. We are dealing with the interaction, the social interaction between us and other people. And so we need to learn how to program and train ourselves so that we can have healthy experiences as we have these interactions with other people. And what better way to do that than to break the information down, to truly understand how does this work and how can I take this apart and piece it back together to paint the picture that I want to paint. Because you can't draw or paint a painting if you don't really know what your palette is. And that's what breaking the information down is about. It's about being able to have a palette in front of you, knowing what all the different colors of the spectrum are, so that you could bring it back together and paint the picture that you want in your life. So with dealing with the affection in general, you have to really understand that the affection is based on the fact that you want to feel the romance that you have trained to feel when you watch videos on Netflix, when you watch TV shows, when you are listening to propaganda and advertisement and so forth on the radio or on YouTube commercials. When you are trained and conditioned to feel romance, that is just informational stuff. It's surface stuff that doesn't have to do with the real deep down stuff that has to do with what you really are looking for with the affection. So that's where I said earlier that there is a very fine line that you need to be careful with when trying to yearn or feel or desire that affection that you want when you're dealing with depression. You need to understand that there is romance, which is separate from the actual condition or experience of trying to feel affection, and then there's affection itself, which is the enlightenment experience, the love of the happiness, the unconditional love as we have described it in our society, in our language, of really feeling what it's like to be happy and excited about something or someone without there being a reason for it. That's when you truly feel love, as they so describe it within our language, but really it's just that experience of enlightenment, right? So that's what we really need to understand as we're dealing with affection in regards to how do we really get it in a healthy sense? How do we get affection from people when we're dealing with depression without making it something that is unhealthy, without making it something that makes people uncomfortable, makes us uncomfortable, makes them uncomfortable? Because when you're dealing with your depression, you're still dealing with anxiety. You're still dealing with other conditions that are affecting you. A lot of us still deal with attention deficit disorders that distract us from the ability to really process information clearly the way that I am describing it right now. We're unable to think things through clearly because we're so distracted by the noise and the voices in our head with so much stuff happening in our life. And so if you go back, if you really are interested in the things that I'm talking about and you want to break down the information on each subject separately, you should really just go to my YouTube channel, check out Cup of Noodles, look for the playlist under #therapygaming, and look at each session, depression, anxiety, and ADHD. And then you'll see how I break down the information into how they work with the body physiologically, neurologically, scientifically, and then I break it down into how we can deal with it in our daily life, tips and techniques that I use myself on how to kind of give us a nudge to get out of that mentality or get out of that feeling when you're dealing with anxiety, because anxiety is a feeling more than it is a mentality, whereas depression is more of a mentality than it is a feeling. They have their own kind of paths that they go into. They all tie into each other one way or another, which is why they're all subjects that I've been going through one after the other, but they are their own conditions. They are separate from one another. They're dealt a lot differently than one and another, even though they are tied together. Thank you so much for the love there, Flame. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you being here as usual. Thank you for the host, man. So with wanting that affection, we need to understand what I explained earlier, is that if you're going to look for the affection with depression, yes, it's okay for us to get affection, but it needs to be healthy affection. It needs to be affection that you are going to be able to trust a person, that is going to be able to provide you a friendly, kind, healthy, positive, and supportive conversation. If you can have a person that can be with you, around you, that can have a conversation with you, talk to you, spend time with you, do positive things, feel positive things, and talk about positive things, then you have received the proper, correct, healthy type of affection. If you can't get that type of affection, then there might be in there a complication somewhere where one condition will be trumped, where they will either talk about something toxic, they will make you feel something toxic, or they will interact with something toxic. And that toxicity will be a negative vibe, a negative experience that will trip you back into your depression mode, because you are a very sensitive individual. You need to remember that when you're dealing with these health conditions, when you're dealing with these mental health conditions, you are a very, very sensitive butterfly. You are so sensitive to everything that's happening with you. And if you go back to my topic on ADHD, you will see a description, a defined, a detailed description, scientifically, mentally, physiologically, neurologically, heartfully, why we are so sensitive to the sensory, to the ability to see, hear, taste, and touch things, because of what we're going through with our mental health conditions. And because we're going through that with our body, it makes it very difficult for us to deal with and interact with other people, or even things, even entertainment, because of the fact that there can be just a simple thing that can be negative, and then bam, you're just down the tunnel again, digging to try and get out and stop drowning, and the depression slaps you in the face. One of the hardest things is that as we try to condition ourselves to deal with depression, and we find techniques and methods, and we even seek out help from professionals, we get progress, right? And we feel that one step forward, and then anything happens and bam, you're 3 steps backwards. The things that I'm talking about today is the reason why that happens. It's because we're so sensitive with our sensory being so heightened, that we're sensitive to everything that's happening around us and the people that are engaging with us, and we have to try and avoid those interactions and those subjects and those objects that are causing toxicity, that are making us go backwards. We need to stop going backwards. So the best thing you could possibly do when trying to deal with affection, when you really get that yearning for affection, to get the positive affection, is, like I said, I'm going to reiterate or re-summarize or go back to the subject, is that you need to find someone who can speak, interact, and do positive things. If they can't meet those criteria, it's going to be difficult for you to snap out of the ability to deal with your depression, or even your anxiety, or even your ADHD, because this applies to all 3 of them. No matter which mental health condition we're dealing with, we are going to be sensitive with our body, with our entire body. Look back on my previous topics. I have discussed already how it affects our entire body, from our heart to our lungs to our stomach to our brain, okay? They all work together. It's a very complicated science that happens with our body when we're dealing with anxiety and depression and ADHD. And there are so many things that can influence and affect it that you got to be very cautious about how you're dealing with your interaction with the world, in order for you to really snap out of it and get a better, healthier, positive, and more successful life, to try and get out and away from the mental health conditions you're dealing with. The biggest thing for us to realize as we deal with these subjects, with the mental health conditions, is to realize that even though we can find ways, techniques, tips, and conditions, or reprogramming to get our support to get to the help that you need, you should never have to do it alone. That is the